Wendebee was constructed in 1951, so it is an antique, yes. I'd be surprised if there was another boat quite the same as this in all of Canada. This particular model, the Chris Craft, hulls made between, I think it's 50 and 52. There's only 20 of them that were made. Not sure exactly if how many are left, or if any are left at all, other than this one.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. At this time in our cruises, we normally give you a little bit of history of this vessel. July 27th, 2001, Captain Rick Hopkinson at the helm here, and myself, commonly called Gilligan or Brent, started an adventure by launching the Wendebee II into Lake Diefenbaker. That took place after a 725-kilometer trip from Winnipeg that required a marine truck brought in from Montreal to haul a yacht of this size.
Tom Watson, and from Winnipeg, build boat.
So how long have you been working on the Wendebee?
Probably since it came to Winnipeg in, what, 67?
This is a 55-foot motor yacht featuring mahogany wood throughout the aft deck, salon, and stateroom, and is powered by twin 671 Detroit diesel engines that are rated at 250 horsepower each, and is accompanied by a lighting plant on board to generate electricity and heat. In 1967, Captain Bill Harris, Captain Rick's uncle, purchased this yacht in Florida and named her the Wendebee II after his two daughters, Wendy and Debbie.
1952, I believe it was launched in Florida.
And was in Florida for, I believe it was around 18 years, known as the Ajimir 7. And then it was purchased by Rick Hopkinson's uncle, Bill Harris, and he bought it and sailed it up to New York City, up the Hudson River, through the Erie Canal, through the Great Lake, the whole entire Great Lake system, through 33 lock systems. Then put it on a couple of rail cars and shipped it to Winnipeg and launched it onto the Red River. And he used it as his private toy for, I think, 25 years, and then started doing charters on it and had quite a few well-known dignitaries, including Princess Anne twice and Prince Charles on it once.
We're sitting where the princess likes to sit. So, and we have our own Marilyn sitting where the princess always sits. Marilyn, can you give us a princess kind of wave?
Rick said that his uncle was thinking about selling the boat. And Rick said, maybe we should buy the boat. And I looked at him like, I think I said, are you nuts? I don't think so. And I can remember I was watching TV. It was a Friday night at the time, and I sat there. And Rick and I we're both very business and career-minded people. And I thought maybe we could, maybe it would be a really fun charter business, because I knew what the boat was like, and I knew it would be very, very unique in Saskatchewan.
We were over at Brent's for dinner one night, and we talked about renting a boat in the Caribbean of this size, or maybe even a little bit bigger, and going for a week cruise. And so we had that interest together of doing something like that. But then when my uncle approached me and asked if we were interested in, if I was interested in purchasing the boat, I certainly said that it was more of a venture than I was prepared to do on my own. And I called Brent up instantly because he had a great desire for boats. And I don't think it took any more than about 10 minutes of talking to Brent, and he was in with it, and that's how we bought the boat.
Rick chastised me several times afterwards that I didn't say to Joyce, "What do you think?" I just kind of said, "Yeah, sounds great." And my wife, thank God, she's been really supportive.
I'm like, yeah, he did answer that rather quickly, but then we discussed it, and then the four of us flew out to Winnipeg to see the boat, and we definitely did sleep on it before the decision was made.
Currently traveling about 7.3 knots, and we're in 81.5 feet of water. Got it back to about 900 RPM right now, and our speed has dropped down to 6.5 knots. This is the throttles here. This is your port engine and your starboard engine. When we're traveling at around the 7 knots, we're using around 7 to 8 gallons an hour.
And then we walked down to the dock in Winnipeg. It was at the Royal Manitoba Yacht Club, and it was the first boat, right? It's kind of the showpiece boat of that dock. And, you know, obviously it was, wow, I went, that's amazing. You're seeing, you know, maybe a few stars, and you're not really thinking of the realities of life. And imagine having part of this boat as yours, and staying it on it, and starting a business in Saskatchewan with it. And after the process of purchasing it, we became aware that there was a little more that needed repair and a little more maintenance than we thought we had anticipated. Lots, there was much more than lots. And I'm happy to say that I think that if we hadn't have purchased it, that it would have come into disrepair within a couple or 3 years.
My uncle owned this boat prior to, and he sailed it in the ocean when he was in Ft.Lauderale. And when he brought it back to Winnipeg, the Lake Winnipeg being a very shallow lake, it can get very rough in a hurry. And he was on this boat in 18-foot waves. Don't think I would want to be on the boat in 18-foot waves.
Bill came out and spent a month with both Rick and I on the vessel, just practicing docking and crawling through every corner of the vessel and learning, giving us all the information he could. And he was such a fun guy to be around, and quite a charmer. You got your captain's papers immediately, and the following year they came out and tested us both in the operation. We took courses in the meantime and spent time in Vancouver, but they actually wanted to test us on this boat. Rick had an inside in that one because he'd almost grown up sort of around the boat and spent a lot of time on the boat.
When I got to Winnipeg in '67, was out on it a few times. The treat is going through the locks. You know, when you get in there and they close the gates and the water just all goes down, and it's quite a thing.
Well, its biggest weakness is its age.
There's always the good and the bad about it. It's it's sad that the season's over and the cruises are done, but it's always nice once the boat comes out of the water and it's up on dry dock, and it probably will only be between a week and 2 weeks, somewhere in that area. So I mean, it's always about how, when you get into things and what you find sometimes too, so you have to replace a little bit more of this or a little bit more of that.
In Winnipeg, they had a ramp that was almost designed for this boat. Here, that was not the case. We can't realistically pull this boat out in Elbow. We have to go to Danielson. It's always a stressful thing when you're moving a boat around in 2 feet of water, and you're always afraid that you're going to whack the carriage somewhere where it would just not be good. And if we go too far in, the props will hit the back of the carriage, and you're moving it virtually inches at a time. It's the biggest adrenaline rush of the year. The logistics of getting a proper trailer that would work in Saskatchewan on the ramps here, that's a challenge. Coming over. How to put a 55-foot boat totally straight in a space that's about 4 inches wide in a crosswind. That's a challenge.
Which way is the wind going in this one?
This particular vessel will turn on its own axis. And so although it may look like it's really hard to dock, once you get the hang of it, it's real easy.
Well, often I can't follow the directions as fast as Rick can give them. But we've done it for 7 years and seems to work. No, I've got it turned all the way.
Straighten it out, straighten it out. Now, right here, right here, right here. We'll float right here. Just yeah, I know. Here, on the rope.
Actually, every year when I come here, we look at the boat and generally pick out what I'm going to do for next year before we leave. You know, look for planks that are maybe sprung a little bit that aren't bad but need some more attention. This year we got to replace there's a frame I want to replace and a couple of things. But, you know, it's a 50-year-old boat. Needs some, you know, TLC. Here, it's more what winter storage does to them than what the water does to them. It's hard getting some of the species we're used to, but mahogany, I can get mahogany pretty well. Just sometimes it's not the same kind. You know, it's a little different species. A lot of it's plantation grown even now. So my whole shop, it's in the back of my truck right now. The span saws, table saw, thickness planers, you name it, it's in there.
You can't let it get away. I mean, that's one of the things with a wood boat. You have to carry out your maintenance on a regular basis. You know, we constantly every year are painting and upgrading, because the last thing you need to do is let any water get into the wood, which is causing rot in the wood, because then you have to start replacing you know, mahogany and wood, and it's certainly a lot easier to do the maintenance on it on a yearly basis than have to go to that extent.
We're going to go down to some farmland that's about 2 miles that way, and then we're going to go where it's smoother, which is across the lake.
You get this business in boating about rag boaters and stink potters and never the twain shall meet. We never really allowed that to happen here, because here, when you leave this bay, you might as well be going into the middle of Africa. I mean, you're on your own. So you really depended on one another. You know, if somebody ran aground, they needed a power boat, and we only had a few. So there was really no time to be making smart remarks one way or the other, quite frankly. And you couldn't call them rag boaters either, because there were too many of them, they'd kill you. So
we sail a lot on this lake, and so we're quite familiar with the lake. You can see wide groups of people who usually aren't on the water like to come here. It's nice here because there are very few places in Western Canada, maybe other than Lake Winnipeg, that have this kind of water.
It was formed by the damming of the South Saskatchewan River. Started in about 1960, completed in about 1967. It was quite a project with the two dams, the major dam being the Gardner Dam and the secondary dam being the Qu'Appelle Dam. And it was quite a change for us, because as kids we used to boat on the river before the lake was ever here. So it was interesting watching it rise and change the scenery totally.
Right now we're headed towards the Gardner Dam, and if we were to carry on in the direction that we're going past the Gardner Dam, we'd end up in South Saskatchewan in downtown Saskatoon. From this point, you actually can get to 3 major cities in Western Canada. If, as we were coming out of the port, we would have gone towards the Qu'Appelle Dam, which eventually enters into the Assiniboine River and joins up with the Red River at the Forks in downtown Winnipeg. The other direction, just the other side of that elbow over there, if you were to go that direction, you end up at Sask Landing, at the end of the lake, and joining in with the Bow River and end up in downtown Calgary.
This was a farm community when I was a kid, and in some respects, some of us hate to see it leave that, but it is. It's now a tourist destination.
There's been several new elbows, I think. 1917, this village, or this town at the time, was a relatively large town. It was 700 to 800 people. several hotels, all the professions, and a service center for the area. After that, of course, farming fell on hard times. The 30s came and things drifted away. Once again, when the Gardner Dam was built, this became another important area for housing the workers and servicing the area. So a second boom occurred. And now, here we are in the 2000s, and it appears that Albertans, among others, have discovered a resort community.
We've met the people in Elbow, and they've had a really active summer with their events for saving the elevator and fundraising, and I've met some really wonderful people, and they're a close-knit community, and the boaters seem to be a fun, close-knit community, and it's just that it's that kind of thing of a small town. It's just you get to know the people, and it's just a little bit different than, of course, the bigger city.
We saw the Wendebee when it first came into Elbow, and initially they had it on the hard, and it was on this great big trailer using a semi to pull it around, and then the next spring we saw it in the water, and have really enjoyed seeing that boat on the water. It's got a bit of a rumble to it, so you can hear it coming for a number of miles, but or maybe more, that you feel it coming. We don't see boats in that range over 50 feet on this lake, but as I understand, the Saskatchewan River used to have these big paddle boats that would take supplies to various communities. So in that way, this boat carries on a tradition, only now, of course, strictly for pleasure. When I first came to Regina, I started to sail on Long Lake before we went over to Lake Diefenbaker. I really enjoyed going up to Butler's Cafe, looking at the old pictures.
My dad always said he could remember his first trip to Regina Beach like it were yesterday, because his father took him to Valeport, which is at the head of the lake, and they came to Regina Beach in the Qu'Appelle in 1912. Back in those days, all you had was a rowboat or a canoe. And as part of that ark complex was a boat livery, which I may have been the last person to run the boat livery, and I rented rowboats and canoes. Nobody had motorboats. So if you wanted to go for a motorboat ride, you had to take one of these boats, chartered, or they had moonlight cruises and things like that.
I have been at Regina Beach for over 70 years, counting the summers, but living out here since 75. I did have trips up the lake on the Mona. That was the boat. And Len Platson used to take passengers up certain distance on the boat, and it depended on which trip you were taking, how much it would cost. And that started off at the Ark, which was right on the lake shore. The pilot sat outside of this cabin, and then people sat in a circle around on the deck. It looked like mahogany to me, or walnut, but not knowing what boats are made of in those days. But it was a very luxurious looking boat.
The wood that's on the boat that's what amazes most people of, like the finishes and the mahogany wood throughout, and they're just amazed at how good it looks, actually. Question that we've actually worked out the square footage when you take the aft deck and the all of the levels. I think it works out to, and it's just over 1,200 square feet, I believe.
This is your high-end boat. Everything's like fine furniture inside.
This is called the mid-salon, and most of the wood, or a lot of the wood in here, is original. We've refinished them from what they were, but that was the original equipment. It's kind of like your living room at home.
I honestly don't know the history of it and where it comes from, but I do know it's very unique in the way that it does go to a dining room table.
And then we have one lever at that end and one lever at this end.
We're ready for dinner.
The galley is much like you would see on many trailers, except that it's all mahogany on the walls, and there's holders for your champagne glasses, and there's 3 sinks on it that are specifically, they're very deep and set up for washing when you have a lot of water sloshing around. I'm very proud of that fridge. It's an original fridge, came with it, custom built for this boat, and it'll hold hundreds of beer, and it's quite deep. If you ever spill anything in there and you have to empty out the bottom of it, you virtually have to climb into the fridge to clean it up. It was originally, I understand it was Bill's crew, and he had a crew of 2 that he hired, and there was 2 berths there and a little sink and a little mirror, and that's where his crew would spend the evening. It's called the stateroom, and there's actually, going down the stairs into the bottom level, there's 2 washrooms there. There's a double berth and a single berth down there, and they're very much like being in somebody's bedroom, only it's all custom built cabinetry, and just a lot of the little things that are built into these boats that I would never have thought of. You open the closet door and it's long and narrower, and there's a rod along the top that's quite heavily built, and instead of you trying to reach back to get your clothes at the back of the closet, the rod slides straight out into the middle of the room. It sure doesn't feel like you're on a boat. It doesn't feel like you're in a house, but it doesn't feel like a boat. It's I'm not sure how to describe it. Kind of makes you feel nautical.
It just shows you what the boat looks like on the outside, and then heights of the decks and the layout on the inside. But the layout's different here because the people who bought this boat have the aft cabin's different. Because on this one there's another smaller stateroom there and another smaller stateroom there, which aren't in this boat. This is hull number 5419, which isn't this boat. They're all the same, but that's the arrangement in that boat. Where this boat was, the people who ordered it wanted a single cabin in the back. The guy that bought the rights to build the Chris Craft boats in the 80s donated all the old Chris Craft records to the Mariners Museum in Newport News, Virginia. And if you want anything, that's where these came from. You phone them up with the hull number of the boat, any Chris Craft, and they will look up their records, and 99% of them they have, and they can sell you line drawings, they can sell you the original pictures of not necessarily your boat, but like the publicity pictures they made when the boats were sold, and they show you the layout of all the hardware. In fact, they'll even send you the hull card, which is when the boat was delivered from the factory to the original dealer. It would have been checked out, and it has marked on it all the accessories that are on the boat and what came with it. And kind of, some of those things are kind of interesting. Some of these guys really have to have all of it. It was available with 3 engines, as you can see in that drawing over there. There's a 3rd propeller between the other 2. So it just depended how fast you wanted to go. The boat was completely rewired when these people bought it. We redid everything. On boats, nobody ever takes anything out. They'll put in a new radio, they run new wires, but they don't take the old wires out, and that's what the condition the boat was sort of in over all those years. There was way too much stuff that wasn't doing anything, so we ripped everything out and did it all over again. So all the wiring in the boat is probably no more than 6 years old.
It did have radar on it originally. Actually, right here where the depth finder was, this whole spot was taken up by a radar. They were quite large and bulky back in those days. And that was basically what it had. It had a compass and radar on the boat. Now, of course, we have the GPS, the depth finders. We also have our radar on the boat as well. The grain elevator was scheduled for being torn down, like most of the rural grain elevators were, and the town got together of Elbow to save the grain elevator and turn it into a museum. It's a great landmark for the boaters, and it's very visible right now to us, and we're a good 6-7 miles away from it. So it's a great guide to knowing how to get home.
Because of course it's something that everyone here is so proud of, and we really do take it as part of our family, and the people who run it are so gracious and such good good corporate citizens that you just naturally get attached to it. It has a history, and you sort of feel that the minute you go onto it, because it's old, but it's elegant.
It's a very unique old boat, and they've done a wonderful job of restoring it. They treat the people very well that they take on their cruises. They're excellent.
Boy, it's steady. Joyce loves it. It doesn't lean, you know.
It's just beautiful.
We don't get more than 3 degrees off here.
Oh, it's just lovely.
Forever, as long as you just keep ahead of it. You know, don't let anything get bad. Fix the things that look like they might be getting bad, and you'll never have to worry about the boat going away.
You know, I recognize they're a lot of work, and this crew has done a magnificent job of upgrading and maintaining the Wendebee II. But they are a lot of work, but they really show well, as you can tell. And that's kind of the joy of it, protecting the heritage of something. I like old houses and old cars as well. Things from our past that are worth keeping are worth keeping, and this is certainly a prime example in Saskatchewan.
Everybody has a really nice time on it because it is so unique, and it's just such a creative thing to have in this area. And we try very hard, of course, to have so that everybody can have a good time. And so far, you know, the cruises have been so successful that I'm really proud of that. And we've met so many wonderful people, and we've got a lot of support from Elbow, and I'm just really happy about that.
What a secret in Saskatchewan. Just, it's unbelievable. Nobody knows how great this lake is.
And the town, and the amenities that are here as well.
In Western Canada, it's the largest inland marina. There's 130 boats slips here right now. They have a waiting list of 20. And obviously we'd love it if the government would invest a pile of money in here. But right now, there's nothing from Thunder Bay to Vancouver that compares to this.
No, it's been terrific. Again, I can't say enough about the people and the people at the marina and all of Elbow. They've been great, and we feel very welcome here, and happy to be here, and happy to grow here. And we're going to be here for a long time. So
We've had most of our friends out, and they have to see it to believe it. Everybody seems to want to call it a houseboat. And so we have to say, it's not a houseboat. You'll have to come out to see it. So the line is, if the flag is flying, we're here. So come aboard.
On behalf of Captain Rick and Lori and Joyce and myself, we would thank you for your support, and we're glad you came with us today, and hope you had a pleasant afternoon with us. Thanks again. Thank you, Brad.
Oh.